we'll get straight to our first speaker, which is Taylor Hunt. I'm going to introduce him before I get him to get up. He's our Acting Manager of Recreational Fishing in the VFA. You'll all know him because he makes himself known. It's one of the things that the VFA is most proud of is he gets out and talks and communicates with people. It's wonderful. He's been with us for 12 years, loves fishing. He's got involved in some great programs that some of his ideas and others are other people's ideas he's taken forward. Helped us stock 10 million fish, slot limits on Murray cod, new populations of trout, cod and perch, cracking a code on Macquarie perch. He helped us pull together the 10th World Recreational Fishing Conference. It's fantastic work. He's passionate. We all love him. His presentation's titled A Decade of Discovery and Learning from the Past. Over to Taylor.
Thanks, Gus.
I also told him to keep everyone to time, so just keep an eye on him, would you? He's got to finish by 9:30.
Thanks, Gus. Beautiful stuff. And yeah, wonderful to be back here with you. This is our 7th Talk Wild Trout Conference. We started here in 2015. Feels like just yesterday, but it's been a long journey. And my talk is essentially a decade of discovery. So what we've learnt through the Wild Trout program and together over this time. But first of all, I want to share with you some awesome photos from David Anderson. And I reckon this is exactly why we love wild trout fishing. It's about the beautiful fish and the stunning locations, gorgeous environments like this. The fish don't have to be big, they're really pretty. It's about connecting with nature, finding solitude, or maybe it's sharing it with family and friends, and enjoying the enormous health and well-being benefits of trout fishing. And if you're like me, if you haven't been fishing in a while, you feel like something's missing. You've got to get out there and sort of scratch that itch and explore and cast a line. Trout fishing in Victoria has got a rich cultural history. It's been going for over 160 years, and it's estimated that it's worth over $750 million to the economy, 11,000 jobs, which is hugely important to places like here in Mansfield for communities. People come and spend money and they stay overnight and get a few beers at the pub like last night. And so it's really important to Victorians, but these are the scenes that we keep coming back to. Beautiful environments and awesome fish and lots of fun. And at the VFA, we love trout too. We're all trout fishers. And on the way up here for this event and anything we do around the state, we love getting out and having a cast and going for a fish. And that goes right from the top, from Gus. He's an avid, keen trout fisher and a fisher for everything, to Trav. You can see Trav up there when he had hair. That's from quite a few years ago. He's got some more recent photos of trout fishing, but I couldn't put them up on the screen. Our senior leadership team from Mel and Kylie and Luke, who couldn't be here today, but Brian Mottram in the top left-hand corner. Brian, are you in the audience? Can you put your hand up? Right up the back there, so say g'day to Brian afterwards. Of course, Anthony Forster, manager of inland fisheries and the Guru Fisheries manager. There's Anthony with a rainbow trout. Anthony likes to target the stonkers, but I'm more of a purist brown trout kind of guy whenever we go fishing, but he loves those fish. We've got Mark Adams in the team now from Snobs Creek. He's an avid trout fisher. And Mark, can you put your hand up and wave to the audience? And right through the team to Julie, who's been out getting this event ready. She's out there planting trees with the Australian Trout Foundation. We've got Briggsy, who's going to be talking today. Jared Lyon from the Shag Management Authority is going to tell us all about shags and what he's doing to reduce their numbers. Even Hannah Herring, one of our VFA grads, with a beautiful brown trout there from Lake Wendouree. And John Douglas, who many of you know has worked for the VFA for 35 years, just recently retired. He's in the audience today as a trout fisher. So we are trout fishers at heart, and that's what we love, and we are with you, and we want to make it as good as it can be. And today really is a celebration of trout fishing, great trout fishing, relationships, and the community that we've got around trout fishing. And I reckon it's a pretty good time. We've just come off 3 amazing years of trout fishing. And today we're going to hear from some inspirational speakers like Phil Weigel and Shay and James about their love for trout fishing, what you can do to improve your catches. We're going to hear from Terry about the habitat work going on, which is amazing for social license. Shay and Karen are going to talk about getting more women involved in fishing. And we're going to hear about those mental health and wellbeing benefits from John and Matt. So we're in a great spot right now. Trout fishing is good, generally good. Last few years have been good, and we'll see what this season holds. And we've got an awesome community and a lot of good things going on. But this has been a decade of discovery, and really it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. And when we started this journey in 2010, it wasn't this good. We were at the bottom of the roller coaster, and these were the headlines at that time. And some of you will remember this in the front page of the Weekly Times. Hook, line, and stinker. Trout in trouble, and anglers blame government. It was a pretty tough time. It was a hot summer. It was dry. Trout numbers were down. No one was catching any trout. It was called the trout drought. We went out and did some surveys and confirmed, trout numbers were really, really down. Terrible. Even worse, as a footy lover, the Cats were smashed in the qualifying final by the enemy Hawthorn, and then out in straight sets to North Melbourne. Terrible time. No trout. Cats had gone. Just a disaster. But the trout was a big focus. So we had a lot of different questions popping up. Why were there so few trout around? What was going on? Was it because of cormorants? Was it the water temperatures? Was it a lack of stocking? Was it willow removal? Was it the climate changing? We didn't have those answers to those questions. But what we did is, together with a group of anglers, and many of which are in the room today, people like Graham Godbar from the Mansfield and District Fly Fishers, Matty Byrne, Phil Weigel, who we're going to hear from, Terry, we basically got together, formed a reference group, and put together a program of works to try and understand what was going on, what's happening with our trout fisheries, and what could we do to improve them. This program of works was called the Wild Trout Fisheries Management Program. Long name, but it is the largest investment that we've ever had into trout fishing in Victoria. Over $2 million of fishing licence fees went into this. And it was basically a collaboration between the anglers, the researchers and the managers to use an evidence-based approach. So try and learn and find out all of these questions and see what we can find out what's going on with our trout fishery through research, monitoring and engagement. Do experiments. Is it stocking? Is it the water temperatures? Get the experts from around the world to come and talk with us and find out what's going on. So it's really changed how we manage our fisheries, but we've learned a lot over this time. And these are the key findings that I think we need to keep in mind when we talk about our trout fishing today. So the key learnings over 10 years, right? First of all, trout are seasonally dynamic, but they are resilient. The footy team analogy is not perfect, but it's not terrible either. You don't expect your footy team to win a premiership every year. They go up and down. There's good years and there's bad years. And that's the same with trout fishing and our trout populations. So we've done over 50 surveys of rivers over the last few years, and we found that our populations do go up and down. And 2013, which is this dip here, was a real low point, but they bounce all the time, depending on the conditions and the seasons. And when conditions are good and the habitat is good, we have spikes. So trout fishing is not static. And the things that really make a difference is the temperature. So trout are a cold water species, and those hot, dry seasons are really no good for trout at all. We know that trout will stop feeding once temperatures go above about 19 degrees. And in these hot summers, we are seeing temperature spikes in some of our wild trout rivers into the mid-20s, even 27, 28 degrees. Really, really bad for trout, and it can be lethal. What we really want is those temperatures pulled down nice and cool. And so those cool, wet seasons are really good. And that's what we've just had the last 3 years. 3 years of La Nina, good trout populations, good trout fishing. So we've learnt this over lots and lots of research. We've had Dr. John Morangiello come and join us at the Talk Wild Trout Conference in 2015 and 3 other conferences. And Dr. Morangiello is an expert in fish and climate, and he told us that Victoria's climate is warming and it is getting drier. There might be people who don't believe it, but his monitoring and the evidence shows we've already warmed 1.5 degrees since the early 1900s, and by 2050 we're going to warm another 2.5 degrees. And what that does is it puts real strain on our trout populations. His modelling is estimating that climate is going to result in up to a 50% decline in trout range by 2030, which is only 6 years away. So what that means is, and the survey showed this, the upland reaches in rivers are still really good for trout, but those lower land reaches, they're more marginal. And in those hot summers, trout are receding, going back up the rivers. And I think we're all seeing that in our trout fishing. Where trout used to be 30 years ago, they're only there maybe 1 in 5 or 10 years. So the modelling is showing this, and it's pretty sobering. It's not a great outlook and pretty concerning. The silver lining in all of this is there is something we can do about it. And Dr. John's work showed that if you shade the streams, you can actually bring the temperature down by 10 degrees. So in the heat of summer, instead of it being 25 degrees, you can bring it down to 15, which is great for trout. And that streamside shading buffers temperatures, and it's already been embraced by people in this room, and we're going to hear about it from Terry and others shortly. So that's been profound, and we'll touch on that a little bit more. We've investigated this idea that maybe fishing pressure is causing an issue for our trout. There were concerns maybe there's too many trout getting taken out. We've actually looked at this quite a few different ways, and we've found that although a lot of people visit the high country and go fishing, only a proportion of those actually catch fish. And of those, most people are catch and release, and most people in this room would be catch and release. We've also put out high reward fish and found that very few of those got caught. So we are nowhere near at risk of overfishing our trout, which is a really good thing. Fishing pressure doesn't concern us in the wild trout fishery. We've also explored stocking, fry stocking, and incubator trials. And the way I describe this is they're really feel-good activities. We feel like, and we hope it's going to make a difference, but if we are really evidence-based, so far the evidence says it doesn't boost the trout numbers in our rivers. We'd love for it to work, but unfortunately it doesn't appear to do that. And the best example is when we stocked the yearlings into the upper Goulburn and the upper Hauqua. Remember, we got 30,000 yearling brown trout, and all of the anglers, all of you came to Snobs Creek and helped fin clip them so we could tell they were our stocked fish. And then we let them go into the Hauqua and the Goulburn, and for the next 3 years we went and tried to catch them, and we electrofished to see how many were left. And of those 30,000 fish, you'll remember we only found 16 of them, 16 out of 30,000. So it was really profound. Then we moved on to incubator trials, and again, really feel-good activities. We fill all the incubators up with the eggs, we put them out into the streams, and the eggs hatch. But when we come back and look for those fish, we don't find our stocked fish. We find our wild fish coming back. The environment is doing it far better than what we can. Similar with the fry stocking. We've only got one river which has shown a glimmer of hope, one river out of 6 in 5 years. And to me, that suggests we are not boosting populations. We'd like it to, but the evidence just isn't there. We've also looked to see if our genetics in our trout are okay. We've been pretty isolated for a long time from the rest of the world. We can't bring any new trout over to Australia since 1968. So there were thoughts that maybe our trout are stunted, maybe they've got some genetic bottleneck. Dr. Brett Ingram looked at this and he compared our trout, and you guys collected fin clips for us. He compared our trout with trout from the UK, the US, Europe, and we're not too bad. We're right in the middle. There's no limitations to the genetics. Probably most powerful in this learning for us is we've been able to bring over experts from around the world to share their experiences with us, and they've stood here on this stage, and you can see some of the pictures up there, and they've told us that we are not alone. The things that we are seeing in our trout fishery is exactly what's happening in the US, in Canada, the UK, and across Europe. Climate is affecting all the trout fisheries around the world, but all of these experts say the same thing. If we restore the habitat and work together, that's the best thing that we can do. Dr. Dan DeWalter, top left-hand corner there with the Target 1 Million sign, he said it best, and Terry quotes it all the time: if we take care of the habitat, the fish and the fishing will take care of themselves. April shared her same experiences with stocking. So we are not alone. These are the same things happening around the world, which gives us a lot of confidence. The whole program's been about a partnership. We've learnt these things together. We don't always agree on all of these things, and I'm sure there'll be people that disagree with this, but we've explored it together. We've done the fin clipping, the fry stocking, the incubator trials, the habitat planting, and all the planning all together. It's a partnership. And that's what we're committed to keep doing, but that's what's made this program so successful. It's really lifted up all of our understanding. We've even put it together into a wild trout strategy, and I saw Kevin and I told him we'd mention this. And so this really puts together all the activities we could do in the wild trout fishery and says, what are the priorities? And this wild trout strategy, although it's nearly coming to an end, really stacks up and puts us in a good spot. We've been able to share all these findings and learnings at the Talk Wild Trout Conference. And I think they've been an amazing success. And yeah, credit to all of you coming out, giving up your time to talk with us and hear about this and go fishing tomorrow, because it is a partnership. It's a two-way street. And these conferences, we've had over 1,000 anglers come here to Mansfield. We have been to Melbourne on one occasion, and during COVID, we actually had an online conference as well. Last year, Terry presented to the World Rec Fishing Conference to over 5,000 people. It's all been about learning, sharing and networking, and together we understand more about what's going on in our wild trout fishery. So the 10-year journey, we've gone from hook, line and stinker, trout in trouble, some pretty bad trout fishing, to today where I reckon we've got some good trout fishing, particularly the last 3 years, but probably more importantly, our expectations are much more managed. We know our trout populations are going to go up and down. We know what impacts them, and we know what we can do to make them better. And we've got some great speakers who are going to share that with us today. And the community around our wild trout fishery is spectacular. And most importantly, tonight, the Cats are still in it. We are going to win tonight and bring home the premiership. And I nearly thought about putting a graph correlating Trout and the success of the Geelong Football Club. I thought it's probably just a bit too much. I'm going to finish up on this slide just with some take-home messages I hope you can take away from this. We value trout. Government and trout fishers haven't always had the best relationship, but I hope you can see from this presentation that we value trout and we absolutely get those benefits that are so important to Victorians. And we've invested really heavily in the trout fishery and will continue to do so through the Wild Trout Program and the boating and fishing plan that the government's putting $96 million in. So we love it, we're with you, and we want to make it as good as it can be. So celebrate and enjoy the trout fishing, share the love, but we will need to lean into the social license. We're going to have challenges. Climate is still here, and there are parts of the community that don't love trout. So all the good things we can do in the trout fishery, whether it be the habitat restoration, which benefits more than just trout, it's the whole ecosystem, whether it's recovering threatened species, which Jared from the Shag Management Authority is going to talk about, whether it's getting more women involved, or the mental health and wellbeing benefits, they're all really good things. We need to shine a light on that and support it so that we can keep trout fishing going and get everyone behind it. And it is a partnership ultimately. So I'm going to finish up there, but I'm really looking forward to the day ahead. Thank you very much.